The past around us is all part of the definition of who we are as a people, as a nation, as a society. There's something in the human condition that means that people want to have a sense of past and where they've come from.
History is not something fixed, but history is something which evolves. Our understanding of the past changes as often as our vision of the future.
Today is about bringing 4 organisations together, the first time that they've actually come together to work in this way. The Arts and Humanities Research Council, the Society of Antiquaries, and this wonderful building where we're holding the conference, English Heritage and the National Trust. And it's to mark the centenary of the 1913 Ancient Monuments Act. And the reason that Act is important is because it was the first major piece of government legislation on heritage.
When you look back at the reports of the debates in Parliament in 1913, they raise questions that are still debated with great energy and great passion now.
What is to be the state's role in preserving our national treasures in terms of our built environment? How do we decide what we're going to value about our cultural heritage? And what is the relationship between history and heritage? They're not the same thing, yet at the same time they do speak powerfully to each other, and they seem to exist in this state of troubled rapport.
Eventually, the Ancient Monuments Consolidation and Amendment Act received assent on the 15th of August 1913. It strengthened existing powers to take monuments of national interest into guardianship. Public access to them was made a right, and this established the basis for acquiring sites in what became the National Heritage Collection.
It's very interesting if you look over the last century that it wasn't until the 1930s that we decided that Georgian buildings were important enough to preserve. It wasn't until the 1950s that Victorian buildings got much of a look in, and you have to wait until the 1960s and 70s before you have a notion of industrial archaeology. So has heritage caught up with history, or are there actually things that are not adequately represented in our National Heritage Collection? The Arts and Humanities Research Council has a strategic programme of research called Care for the Future, Thinking Forward Through the Past. And that programme is exploring the relationship between past, present and future, and how that affects our understanding of the world around us. We're going to be looking at how do we decide what's important and what criteria do we bring to bear in doing that. Wherever those challenges may come from, there are lessons to be learned over the last 100 years in terms of what's possible and what's not possible, in terms of what we expect of government and what we shouldn't expect of government, and in terms of how a wider public and our communities might become involved in heritage protection.
On the eve of the 20th century, New Year's Eve 1900, a Sarsen upright at Stonehenge, along with its lintel, fell in a storm. The vast majority of heritage is in private hands. When one thinks of the 500,000 listed buildings or the 30,000 scheduled monuments, we think strongly that the government could use tax incentives and other measures to make it easier for people to continue to live in historic buildings without causing them to be, to fall down and to be rebuilt. I think the best outcome for me would be that we get government talking about heritage and the historic environment once again, and also that the AHRC continues its partnership with ourselves at the National Trust and with English Heritage. We do need more research into those challenges and how we face them.
I live in Salisbury, and I noticed that many of our towns are having quite uniform housing developments, buildings which are sort of very standardised and very homogenised and are pastiches of the past. And those towns, which are all had distinctive local character, are now all starting to sort of look the same. And we're creating the past of the future, and what sort of past are we creating? At least we can start to discuss those things and actually start to think about how we influence the people that make the decisions on our behalf.
We've got a debate tonight about what government's role should be in championing heritage.
I wouldn't put it too strongly, but what we've saved is safe. I do not feel that about vistas, views, about landscape, and I certainly don't feel it about the area that I take most strongly now, which is the natural and rural heritage.
I found Simon Jenkins tremendously impressive in his concern for the landscape, and that is the next battle.
It's tremendously important to get the public involved tonight. We're live streaming the debate. We've got Twitter feeds so people outside the room who are watching can ask questions, and we'll feed those in to the panellists.
They're trying to save John Maiden's library in Birmingham. This is crazy.
Why is it crazy?
I mean, well, you see,
Crazy by whose standards? By yours or by
these are
rational
precisely my points. You need a language in which you can conduct the conversation.
One of the themes that came across was the need to develop new ways of talking to people about heritage, and we definitely need to do that if we're going to get young people as engaged now as we were when we were young.
I was quite interested in, I suppose you could say, the shift in play between the roles of responsibility between central government and local government.
It's called a housing target.
It's not a government housing target. It is a local government housing target. And that's why it's so important to make sure that the conversation is had with local government, that it understands what it's got and what it has to do.
Looking at local government's role in it, it needs to be defined more clearly, and the fact that they're raising that, there needs to be more structure, there needs to be more legislation in place is definitely something that I think people would support if they knew more about it.
We have a very potent intergenerational responsibility here, I think, and all these agencies are involved in not just thinking about what they give to us now alive, but our children and our children's children. And it really is the transmission of that heritage which is so crucial. What's at stake is our identity, and what's at stake is our presence in the world as it changes about us. And it seems to me that's as important as it gets.
People don't visit these sites and enjoy them, and if they're not prepared to pay to go and see them, it's actually very difficult to maintain them. So the commercial aspect is really important too. And I think that those three sets of criteria, architectural quality and aesthetic value, historical significance, and popularity with the public and pulling power, have not changed that much over the last century. And the interplay between those three things is as important and interesting now as it was in 1913.